Now we're going to talk sprouts. Sprouts are pretty common. You see them around the place. Alfalfa the most common. You get mung bean sprouts and all sorts of lentil and radish sprouts and so on. And the reason why, generally speaking, sprouts are excellent, there's some evidence to show that alfalfa sprouts may not be so good to include because of a compound in there that can actually be toxic to humans, but other sprouts are all good. So we're not going to be doing alfalfa sprouts for the person who asked earlier. So sprouting is, why do we sprout first of all? I mean, it's a way to increase the nutrient content of the food, and it's also a way to make the food more digestible. So in things like nuts, seeds and legumes, these are all things that are very hard to break down. They have a lot of phytates in there, lectins in there that are enzyme inhibitors and anti-nutrients. So they block the absorption of quite a few minerals like calcium, magnesium, copper, zinc, that kind of thing. So if we're eating a lot of these foods in their unsoaked or sprouted state, we can end up with nutrient deficiencies in those areas. So soaking deactivates the phytates and lectins so that we don't have those anti-nutrient properties to it anymore. It also starts to increase the enzyme content because basically they're all varieties of seed, right? They're all what the plant is going to use to burst into life. And so when we're soaking and sprouting, it's thinking it's going to create another plant, and a lot of energy comes into play, a lot of enzyme activity comes into play. So something like lentils, for example, goes from being quite a dead, starchy food to something very live with a lot of vital energy, a lot of enzymes in there. So even if you're cooking your lentils, ideally you want to sprout them to a point where they have little tails on them like this. And that is going to make for a much more digestible meal. In smaller quantities with things like lentils, you can even sprinkle these on salads. You can have a taste of them later on, but they haven't been cooked at all. You know, if you try to eat a dried lentil, you break your teeth, yeah, but this is very soft and crunchy, really delicious and fresh. So with sprouting, there's a number of ways that you can do it depending on how keen you are and how many sprouts you want to sprout. So you can do the simple jar and a tea towel method. This is all the equipment it takes, so you don't have to do anything fancy. So in here we've got sunflower seeds, which only make very small sprouts. They just get their little tips lengthen a bit, and that's about as much as they do. With seeds, nuts and legumes, you need to soak them first. So anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. Usually the bigger the seed or nut or legume, the longer the soak. So 8 hours is a good benchmark for that. Smaller ones might need just 4 hours, or things like buckwheat, which can sprout quite quickly. Once they've been soaked, you want to rinse them, and then you pop them into a jar and put the cover on the top of them, and then you drain them and leave it on an angle. So you might leave it sitting in the dish drainer, for example, or this is kind of the fancy version of that, where you would just pop it up like that. And that allows some airflow to get into the jar while allowing the water to drain, okay? And you need to rinse them, say, at least twice a day, but up to 4 times a day. So what you would do is you just fill the jar with water, put the lid back on, give it a little swirl, drain it again. You just do that 2, 3, 4 times a day, yeah? And then it's just always easier to take the lid off to refill with water rather than trying to get the water to go through the mesh. The other version is using a tray like this. You can even get bigger trays that have even more innovative systems. But basically this, same thing, you still soak them first, And then you need to rinse them again 2 to 4 times a day. But the rinsing is easy because you just pour it in until it covers the red little siphon. Just to even it out because they don't like to sprout if they get too crowded. And then you'll see it starts to feed down to all the layers, and then you just empty out the bottom. So that's a nice easy way if you're wanting to do multiple varieties of sprouts, or if you're sprouting for a family rather than just yourself. So in here we have lentil sprouts up top, broccoli sprouts in the middle, and fenugreek down the bottom. Now broccoli sprouts deserve special mention because there's been a lot of research into the benefits of broccoli sprouts. And if we look at the sulfur components in broccoli that have known anti-carcinogenic activity, there's about 100 times more of those in sprouts, in broccoli sprouts, than in full-grown broccoli. Okay, so in terms of cancer prevention or cancer treatment or support, broccoli sprouts are a pretty amazing food to include in the diet. They also increase glutathione levels, which is your body's main antioxidant and immune compound. So, and it's very important for detoxification. So again, today we live in quite a toxic world. Yeah, we're exposed to so many more thousands of chemicals than we were ever designed to. So the more foods that we have in our diet that are going to help to stimulate detoxification and support detoxification and provide the nutrients we need to be able to carry those processes out, the better. So that is it. So you don't need, sprouts grow obviously in size. So when you are making your sprouts, you don't want to go with large amounts at once. So the samples that you've got are adequate to make for a jar like this. So about a tablespoon and up to a maximum of 1/4 cup. So sprouts in jar, water. So if I did this at night, I do this before bed. And then in the morning, it's soaked all night. In the morning, just tip it up in the sink, let it drain. And then when home from work and before going to bed, giving it a rinse. So filling it up with water again and then tipping it out straight away, not letting it sit and soak. So that is sprouts.